What's up, Internet? My name's Ian Bloom. Welcome to Nerd Finance. I'm your resident financial life planner and huge nerd. Today, we're going to be exploring something a little bit different. This episode is going to be called the first of the Nerd Finance Focus series, which is going to be diving deep into a nerdy topic, and it's going to be a little bit less focused on the real world. I wanted to do this series partially because it was requested by some people, including my friends, and partially because I think the Runescape economy is a really interesting topic to dive into and might be a little bit more fun for me to produce than just the basic finance videos. So maybe you'll get a little more emotion out of me in this one. So we're diving into the Runescape economy because it's a reasonably unique subject as far as in-game economies go. First of all, Jagex built something that models really closely to the real world economy. It's not exactly the same, but there are a lot of features in place that make it very similar to our own, which makes it a very interesting case study. So the first topic that makes it similar to our own is almost everything in the world is craftable or farmable. And when I say farmable, I don't mean literally farming, although that is in the RuneScape game. I mean you can get it from drops or loot or chests or just things that you find throughout the world over and over again which respawn. A perfect example is the Wine of Zamorak, which you can telegrab and get repeatedly as it respawns, and it's worth a significant amount of gold. It's just how much time do you want to devote to casting telekinetic grab on things. So the next element that makes it really interesting is the economy is primarily player to player. And this is not normal for most MMO economies. MMO economies tend to try to take the control of pricing out of the hands of the players because I think the companies are a little afraid to allow an economy to operate on a free market when they are ultimately trying to sell this product to the players. What if the economy gets a little out of control and my player can't get access to the thing they need to do for the quest? That can be potentially very bad for the in-game experience. Well, RuneScape has taken the stance that player-to-player primarily is very important. While there are shops in the game that allow you to buy certain goods, they're usually actually priced higher than what the good trades for with player or between players, and they aren't the primary driver behind the economy. The primary driver behind this player-to-player economy is actually supply and demand, just like our regular economy. If there is enough of a good that the crafters and the people who are trying to level up their, let's say, smithing skill have enough iron, well, then the price of iron will hit an equilibrium point. If there's not enough supply of iron, the price will go up because there's enough demand. And those sorts of things tend to be reflected often within the RuneScape economy. The perfect example is when they released the construction skill. Logs at that time were valued fairly low, about 100 to maybe 200 gold on a good day. But temporarily, for about a week, these logs shot up to between 1 and 2,000 gold per piece, which is a lot of money for a new player. So new players were able to go chop down trees, sell their inventory for 28 to 50,000 gold, and walk away very, very happy, while the higher level players who were interested in leveling their construction skill were getting an ultimately very beneficial service to them, which was a large volume of logs which they would be able to use to level up the skill. So supply and demand really does play a huge role in the RuneScape economy, and kind of the next most interesting part of the economy is the central exchange. It's actually called the Grand Exchange within the RuneScape economy, but it performs a similar function for the economy to the New York Stock Exchange in the sense that you have real-time pricing data and the ability to buy and sell instantaneously with other people. Now, it's very different in the sense that this Grand Exchange doesn't trade stocks like the New York Stock Exchange does. It trades goods within the game, which again, as we have mentioned, most of the goods within the game are used to perform a specific service. So, for instance, if you are buying coal, which is valued at, I believe, 126 GP right now, according to the RuneScape wiki, you can either buy it low at maybe 122 gold or high at 130 gold, and depending on what you're willing to offer will probably line up with how fast your order is filled. So this is very similar to the function that the stock market performs for stocks within our economy. Now, the other interesting thing about the Grand Exchange is that it removed a lot of the player-to-player marketing that had to go on in order to sell goods in previous editions of RuneScape. Before the Grand Exchange was implemented, there were large mobs of people standing around the banks in cities like Varrock and Falador within the game, using wavy text and flashing colored text to market their goods, hoping that even though they were 1,000 gold per item more than their next door neighbor, you would see their text ahead of the next door neighbor because of the funny effects they were making their text do. Well, that also completely changed, because since these centralized pricing data options are not only trackable, but you have one place to go to trade very efficiently, there isn't really much of a reason for that. Now, some older RuneScape players miss those days of standing around in banks and wasting their time spamming text. I certainly do not. The publicly trackable data, in addition to probably preventing a little bit of scammers, is also very unique to the RuneScape economy in the sense that it allows players to probably buy items at more ideal times for them. So you don't want to buy an item that's about to be updated in a patch before it comes out, but that said, you can see if a market for a particular good is at a low or a high point in its usual cycle, and because of that, you can decide when to buy large amounts of things. The last thing that the RuneScape economy has that is fairly unique to most MMOs is trading controls, which were put in place. And these were part of the update that came with the Grand Exchange, but have been expanded upon and contracted over time. But basically, the amount of a good you can buy on the Grand Exchange is limited. So you cannot buy, for instance, 50,000 logs. You are actually limited to 25,000. And what this does is it prevents people from quote-unquote cornering the market on a particular good, thereby driving up the price of it because there's not enough supply to meet the demand, and then that player at the increased price then gets to sell that good for more gold. They wanted to prevent this, I'm sure, because of thoughts of abuse and those sorts of things, but it also, the other controls happen to have some effects on the economy as well. When you are in a trade with another player, this publicly available data is populated in as the value of each side of the trade. So if you're trying to trade 1,000 gold or 1,000 coal, and we're saying that coal is worth 126 GP, when you go to offer up your 1,000 coal to the other player, it'll say this trade is worth 126,000 and the other player's side of the trade is worth blank, which prevents a lot of scamming from taking place. And then the last control is for lower level players, they can't trade disparities of goods that are super big. And what this means is that if you have a second account or whatever, you can't swap goods around as much, which prevents the benefit of having a second account. But then also it prevents newer players from getting taken advantage of, even in these like quick swap things where you try to change what's available in your side of the trade at the last second in order to devalue it and thereby get increased value from the trade. So all of these things were put in place to protect players, and that's much like our regular economy as well. Every piece of our market has at least a reasonable amount of regulation around it in order to prevent things from going too haywire. So that's my deep dive into the RuneScape economy. There's certainly more to talk about this topic. If you have some comments, some questions you want to throw at me regarding it, if you like the video, please let me know on social media or YouTube. As far as continuing to do these types of videos, these will be a little less frequent, but it'll be when the inspiration strikes me. I've been working on this RuneScape episode for a little while because, frankly, I think the RuneScape economy is super interesting. Anyway, if you like this sort of content or want to support me in some way, you can go ahead and check out my website. If you have questions about real-world finance and those sorts of things, book some time to talk. I'm happy to help you out. Thanks so much. Have a great day.